This is Starting Point, a podcast that tracks Guyana's unprecedented growth from all vantage points. Join your hosts, Kiana Wilberg and Fariza Hanif, as they dive deep into the heart of topical issues.
Welcome to this week's episode of Starting Point. I am your host, Kiana Wilberg. With mere days before the 2025 general and regional elections, we're catching up with the Education Minister, the Honorable Dr. Priya Manickchand, to reflect on some of the achievements within her sector and to also talk about a number of important issues and the way forward for 2025 to 2030. Without further ado, I welcome the Honorable Minister to our podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Minister, during the 2020 to 2025 term, we've seen a number of advancements, significant investments. I heard you recently say that the government, through your ministry, has constructed 67 nursery schools, 45 primary schools, 42 secondary schools. And then we saw over the years that there have been a number of advancements, resources for teachers to get things for the classrooms, and then we saw the reinstatement rather than increase of the Because We Care Cash grant.
Yeah.
With all these things that have been happening, what impact have these initiatives had on literacy rates?
So it's a good question. This has been the 5 years that we can record in the history of this country, and I would be happy to look back at this in 20 years' time. And you'll see that it would remain the not even 5 years, 3 years. We're under some very harsh conditions, very unprecedented conditions, not only in Guyana but in the world with COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19, after effects. That the largest investment and action was taken to bring in access, universal access across levels, and to begin the increasing and improvement on quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say 5 years, we didn't have 5 years. We came in August 2020 and schools were closed and the country was in lockdown for about 2 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, and I mean, those things we've forgotten now. We were in masks, we couldn't gather. But that also meant that people couldn't work on a work site. So you couldn't start building the schools. It meant students, training teachers couldn't go get trained because then they'd have to gather. So you couldn't train as many as you wanted or how you wanted. There are some nice benefits that came from those. We'll talk about those later on. But it's really a 3.5-year term that we have been able to do this. And for me, it will always be, and I'm happy to look back at this later in life, that it will be the 3 years that most was done in the sector. And the impact that you speak about is, you don't judge impact only from results, but it's certainly a way and one area of measurement. And we've seen better results by far at NGSA. That's common entrance if you're old like me. So that's the exit from primary school, which is really a placement exam or assessment. But what we've seen is in 2020, we had a 49% of our children passing with 50% or more. And in 2025, it had gone up increasingly and incrementally over the last 5 years. In 2025, it was 64% of our children passing with 50% or more. So now what that means is in 2020, out of every 100 children, 49 were able to pass with 50% or more. Now 64 out of every 100 is able to pass. And so you asked specifically about its impact on literacy rates. Generally, you can, while we haven't had a literacy test across the country for a number of decades, usually it's judged by how many children are in grade 2. And our enrollment rate has always been high, so our literacy rate will be high if that's how we're judging it. But also if you're getting better exam results, not more children doing well at the top, I'm talking about a wider spread, then clearly more children can read. But we're not happy with that. We have just launched the country's first national literacy program. In fact, it's called the literacy programs because it's intervention both at with the children who are going into nursery to make sure that by grade 4 they can read, the children who are going into primary to make sure that by grade 4 they can read, but the children who have passed grade 4 and are either in 5 or 6 or high school or post high school, the adults who cannot read, that we are looking at all of them with various intervention programs, with materials that have been prepared, printed, and tested. And that begins in September in a very conscious, highly invested in, and by that I mean resources are present, staff will be present to make sure our children are reading at an appropriate age level.
Thanks for that insight, Minister. I want to hone in on that statistic you gave earlier. 64% of our students passing overall at NGSA with 50% or more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting stat. And you noted that there is an intervention that is on the way to address the 36% that might be lagging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an important perspective to offer there. But what's the next target? Is there a target to say this literacy program by 3 or 4 years' time, these are the results or XYZ results we want to see?
So in 4 years, so education, especially if you're a person that's impatient, this is not the field for you. And I am impatient, but I've made it the field for me. Education usually is measured in 5-year cycles. You don't generally tend to see quick and short-term results that are sustainable. Why? Let's take primary school. You go to grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. 6 years of primary education in a spiral curriculum, learning something and then a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more until you reach the top for primary. So that's why you measure in cycles of 5 to 6 years. In high school, it's first form or grade 7 to grade 11. Again, a 5-6 year period where curriculum is not crammed into a short thing. So growth is very hard to measure growth in 1 year. But outside of NGSA, we also just saw our CSEC results and CXC CAPE results showing incredible movement from where we were upward to doing better. And it's not, as I was saying, somebody's going to top every year. So we're going to be able to announce a top student every year. And that's great. It's great for the child who tops. But so you can't measure only by an announcement that somebody topped with X number of ones. The way you measure for me is, are we allowing more children from different schools, from more regions, to come into that top bracket, to be able to write their exams and do well. And that was what we saw this year. We saw all the investment in textbooks and trained teachers and actual classrooms for children to sit in, and support to parents through cash grants and breakfast and teachers resources grant, where parents don't have to contribute to resources in the classroom and so on. What we saw was not just the children who topped, but that children from 3 Miles and Bartica, from Anai, from Rukumotu, from Aishalton, from Oriala, from Abramzul, from Anna Regina, from Region 3, from Region 5, like all over, children were able to shine. And that for me is a better measurement than, how many children were in the top 10. So we actually had 6 to 7 children at this year's announcement. And that's because, and it's the largest number we've ever had, not because we wanted to invite a large number, but so many kids did well that you couldn't cut it off. So in NGSA, for example, so I'm going back to NGSA, the top 10 children among the top 10 marks gave us 17 children because so many of them tied. And in that 17, usually all used to be from private schools because that's where the resources were, parents who had money or could buy their textbooks. This year, top 10 marks went to 17 children. Of those 17 children, 9 were from private schools and 8 were from public schools. So that's making this far more equal. And so you're seeing the spread. Children who ordinarily would have been unable to do well are now able to use our resources that are universally accessible and free, and do well. And that for me is really, like my heart's full.
Let's talk math for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been able to understand from children over the last 5 years? Why math for some feels like kryptonite?
Yeah. But I think the world has treated mathematics as this difficult, hard subject. And all of us slightly, I don't know about you, are slightly afraid of mathematics.
Yeah.
And so it's a worldwide problem. So,
Right.
for example, last year, the Caribbean dropped in mathematics by 7 percentage points. The Caribbean are the CARICOM countries who are writing C6. It's not a Guyanese problem. And we also dropped. The CXC, which is the Caribbean Examinations Council, the body looking after exit exams and curriculum content at fifth form or grade 11, they are going to start an intervention program, but from September 2026, that's next year. We'll lose 2 sets of children by then. We didn't. We said, no, too long. There are things we can do that are short term that will lead to both short term, medium term, and long term gains. And so what we did, we made sure every child had a scientific calculator from Form 4, which is grade 10, geometry sets, textbooks, past papers organized by topics, and then sent monitors into the schools to make sure teachers are teaching, that they're teaching correctly, and that children are effectively learning. And what we saw a 5% increase in our mathematics results, which means that more than 500 children this year were able to pass mathematics than last year. And Guyana saw that. The rest of the Caribbean didn't necessarily see that. So it works. What is the problem? The problem is it's chicken and egg. We have people who are afraid of mathematics, and then we haven't adjusted our teaching methodologies and even content-wise what we are doing with our children to make sure that it's could allow for some confidence by higher pass marks. But we're on the right track. 5 percentage points in 1 year is almost unheard of. And, there are critics who want to be skeptical and say, oh, okay, this is a CXC exam, not marked here, not set by us, not marked by us, not in any way interfered with by us locally. Same with NGSE, by the way, that's done by CXC. And these are the results. And so you see ordinary children, we saw schools improving their mathematics pass rate by as much as 60-something and 70-something percent, and 13 and 27%. And this is schools across the country, not just, what we consider the top schools or the schools that are visible to us.
But I want to talk a little bit about how math is being taught.
Yeah.
And the reason why I ask this is because there are instances, and I can give you an example. My dad is an educator, and based on the students that he interacts with sometimes, they would tell him, I don't understand, first of all, why the number needs to be next to a letter. What's the purpose of that?
Yeah.
Some students, they love visualization. They like to understand why they're doing certain things. So the question I have with that is the approach to teaching math, has it changed?
So I think, like I said, there's a bit of a psychological block to mathematics generally. It didn't start last year or the year before. We have been, when I wrote mathematics and English in 1992, I think 19% of the population passed English and 13% passed math.
Wow.
Very low numbers, or the opposite way around. 13 passed English, 19 passed math. So it's always been a problem. Across the world, there's a problem. But children are learning differently now. Some say that's a good thing. So, screens and graphics, very visual. And if you looked at, we have this youngster called Leon Bailey Beaton.
Yes.
He just got married yesterday, actually.
Beating the maths.
Beating the math. And so children see him now, and they used to run from him at the beginning, but now they want to engage him. So it's how you approach it. But I don't think it's also, we have to look at the level. Are we teaching beyond? Are we in keeping with the rest of the world what children need to know at this age? And are we crowding children with other subjects that they probably don't need and not looking at more relevant ways and means of teaching mathematics. So we've made some changes. We've said you must have at least 6 to 8 periods of mathematics every week. So it's not just a rush. We've said that it must be taught. Because you asked me something earlier, what have we learned? We've learned that teachers are teaching math at Friday afternoon in the last period. That's almost certainly going to be a wasted period. Children just think again now getting home, it's too hot,
Right.
all that. We learned that teachers are not finishing the syllabus or teaching effectively. It was a very telling exercise where, a number of teachers were given the paper to write of the previous year. And yeah, it was a very telling exercise. Let me just put it that way. So we learned that. We learned that children aren't turning up. So how do we make sure we engage parents? So we went around this country engaging parents of schools to tell them, look, we have these lessons, we have these extra classes, but your kids aren't coming. Here's the register. How are you helping us at home to do this? We learned that children are far more visual. So if you put graphics on a screen versus giving them a textbook, that they are going to learn. And we learned also that children were borrowing. So if you borrow a scientific calculator the day before the exam, you're fighting with how to use that in the exam room rather than just using it, which is why we gave all the materials long in advance. So there are a couple of things we learned. I still think methodology has to change. And constant training and retraining has to happen. And that has to be informed by measurement and evaluation that was sensibly done and not done with a big stick. We come in here to see if you've taught and if you check the boxes. More hold your hand approach through some of this. So that's what some of the monitors are supposed to be doing. And while some of it has worked, we can see clearly where it didn't make whoever was supposed to be monitoring there clearly didn't monitor.
I want to go back to another comment that you touched on because I think it's so important, leveraging technology and using screens and so forth. We've seen in some instances that technology can definitely be a blessing. It can help students to feel more confident about what they're learning. But then there is the issue of whether it dulls the critical thinking skills. So how is the ministry approaching helping students to still engage or leverage technology, but not lose the importance of building a critical mindset?
Oh, I don't know that it's exclusive. We can't reverse the advent of technology. We can't reverse what has come with it, AI and otherwise. So what we have to do as a world really is to find ways to constructively utilize these tools, because that's what they are. I see them as tools without losing ourselves in them. If you're a parent like me, and you stick a tablet in your child's hand, you don't have to feed them, bathe them, you don't have to look back. So it's very easy parenting, but it's also dangerous. So but I wouldn't it's not mutually exclusive. It's not either or. I think it is, we have to incorporate the use of technology, the use of AI into our classrooms to get results, to get children more individualized learning, to determine better what each child is good at and maybe weak at, and how to strengthen that, or how to channel that goodness into making it a super talent. And so we're at the stage where all our schools will have all our high schools for sure are going to have technology infused into the classroom. We are already at a place where many of our schools already have each classroom with smart boards in them and internet. We've moved from a place where it's very difficult to, and I started saying it earlier, that COVID also gave us opportunities.
Yes.
Right. So when we came in, we couldn't do education the only way the world had ever done it, face to face, whether it was on the tree or Benab or wherever. It was always with a person in front of children. And COVID taught us, well, that's not going to be possible every time anymore. And we either had to choice of folding our arms and letting the world run us, or we use tools and equipment and technology to run the world, and we chose the latter. And so most of our schools are connected from nursery right up to the internet. We have been using television and animation to teach different things, and children are learning those differently. We have apps now that are very interactive from nursery right up. And so we're embracing the use of technology in a healthy, wholesome way.
How are students, well, rather not students, but teachers being sort of informed or put on guard to look out for pieces that may be done by ChatGPT?
So teachers, two things. One, we still have teachers who have to get on board with the use of technology, because we have some older teachers in the system who are very, one, old school, and two, only taught to teach a particular way. So there's still a lot of fundamental things that have to happen in education. So while we speak about digital education and technology infused education, all of that is needed. It is fancy. It's going to be game changers. But you still have a lot of fundamental things that have to happen in education to take us to the place where our investment or our results are proportionate to the investments we're making. So that's always a very conscious, keep your blinkers on, kind of make sure you know you're seeing the results here for all these investments. And AI and the use of AI and ChatGPT and so on is very new to everyone. So we're all still learning. The schools are still learning. There are entire programs you can put in an essay and kind of, we saw that with some politicians.
Yes.
Feed their speech into it, and the whole thing is ChatGPT. And so there's also a nice thing breeding. Young people are, I know some, refusing to use these tools in the same way that, in a way that would make them lazy. They think it's plagiaristic. They think it's plagiarism. They think it's cheating. So it's going to evolve in a way where whenever you have a collection of people, it's large enough, you'll have some delinquents, some willing to take a ChatGPT, and some resisting that. And so this will evolve with rules helping that evolution along the way. So it's very new to the world, very new to Guyana.
There's some big plans in the 2025 manifesto for the education sector. How do they stack up against the plans you hear being proffered by other political parties? For example, the APNU it's promising the electorate it's going to increase budgetary support for UG, stipend for students, more campuses. But what would you tell the voters as they weigh these two?
Yeah, so, we're at the best time ever to determine which political party you can support that would support you back. And so for me, the elections are not about, politicians like to think elections are about them. They're not. The elections are about people, each of you, and your children and your grandchildren and your home and your farms, and you having the power to decide what your life looks like in the next 5 years, and even beyond. And so this is the best time because we've had the APNU, for example, and the AFC, and then a combination of them in government, and we got to see what they did or didn't do.
Right.
And so let's take a comparison. So we saw the beautiful promises. We're going to build schools. We're going to double the cash grant. We're going to give everybody breakfast. And what was the 5 Bs? Breakfast, boots, buses, boats, and something else. Bicycles. The population knows that the children did not go to school in state-provided buses. We didn't get bicycles for our children. Breakfast was their entire regions that never got breakfast. Region 2, Region 10. The East Bank, 3 schools in Barbados got breakfast. People know that. They felt it. It's very easy to sit down and make promises. The population now has the ability to say, well, these made promises and kept them. These made promises and never kept them. It's very the APNU promised. I didn't hear what you said, but they promised free university. It's free. It's free since January. We're now wiping off debts of people who went before. They promised to give a stipend. Well, when they were in office, they raised university fees by 35% for young people in this country. And they did that at a time when Guyana was earning its most, when they were collecting 200 more taxes, which gave them $80 billion more per year than the PPP was collecting in 2014. So there was no need to put on extra 35% on each student. And they didn't need to do that, but they did. They took away the Because We Care cash grant and said they couldn't sustain that and gave nothing in place in return for that. At the same time that they were receiving $8 billion more in taxes per year than the PPP was receiving when it gave $10,000. So you can make a comparison. I ask people to go back in time and tell me what is it Nicolette did or Rupert, and this is not getting personal. These are the people who managed.
Right.
I would expect people to say, well, what did Priya do? And I'm here accounting for what I did, and I'd be happy to give you lists. And I don't need to give you lists because you know what I did. You've been seeing it. But what did these people do? And people would say, who's Nicolette? I kid you not, because they don't know what happened. So for the entire 5-year period, the APNU AFC did not start or finish a single secondary school anywhere in this country. When this country was earning its most, when it was earning, like I said, $80 billion more a year in taxes. Now compare that to 1992 to 2015, when we were at our poorest. We were a heavily indebted poor country. We were paying 94 cents on every dollar in debt. And still, we built secondary schools all over Guyana, and particularly in the hinterland. When we came into office in 92, we had 3 secondary schools in hinterland communities. One at Bartica, one in St. Ignatius, and one at Mabaruma. When we left in 2015, we had built 10 more secondary schools. APNU AFC came in and didn't build a single secondary school in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. We are now building 22 secondary schools in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9, and another 20 in coastland communities. So there's a big difference in what you can do. It's not about money. I just showed you without a cent, a drop of oil, at our most vulnerable financial economic time, when we were a heavily indebted poor country and so deemed by the world, when we paid 94 cents on every dollar in debt, we were building schools, we were training teachers, we were giving breakfast. So it's not about money. It's about whatever we have, we will reinvest in people. It's a heart to make sure each and every person is getting whatever little or a lot we have. It is about knowing what people's needs are and trying to find ways and prioritizing meeting those needs. And that's what you've seen in the People's Progressive Party Civic and their continuous service over a large number of years. So I love hearing people say, oh, well, you all have oil now. We could have oil and do nothing with it.
True.
You had $80 billion more than we did, and you did nothing with it. Well, nothing tangible in education. When we first came in, we didn't have textbooks in 2020. But we consciously bought all the grade 6 textbooks first. So by 2021, all the grade 6 children across this country had all the textbooks they need. And from then to now, we've built up every year so that everybody from nursery to secondary have the textbooks they need. We're now moving towards workbooks. So I snapped a picture, I need to post it, where the book distribution unit is distributing right now workbooks. So that was a big thing for parents. Their children would have to, and teachers, would have to copy the work and then work it out. Now we're giving workbooks, so you could work in your own book across levels. So it's growth, and I'm just saying that it's easy to say, oh, you have all money now. But it's not about the money. It's about how you prioritize human capital and making sure that as the high rises go up on the roads and the bridges I see on your wall and the other fancy infrastructural things, how do we make sure people come along with this so that it's our people who are benefiting from this thriving new beautiful Guyana and who are able to lead and take over, and we don't have to import those skills. And that is very important to us, and it is being done through the education sector.
In the 2025 manifesto for the PPP, there is mention of rolling out civic education. I want you to touch a little bit on what that would look like and how soon that would be rolled out.
So what do we want from our citizens? What kind of citizen would make a wholesome, contributing, competitive citizen? Competitive to the world, I mean. So our citizens will do well at exams, but they'll also know how to be decent human beings, not beat up their wives or husbands. Women rarely beat up husbands, but not cheat, not only in relationships, but on AI and what is the wholesome, productive citizen we're looking for, and how do we make sure our curriculum takes us there? That would be the build out we have to do. Some of it has already been done in social studies, but like I said, I relook at whether we're crowding everything into a curriculum because that's what we're accustomed to. So when I was at school and you were at school, they taught us all the Commonwealth countries and their capitals and income and import and export and currency and who was the head. And you don't need to do that anymore because we could just Google this on our phone and we find it. So you can drop some things that you don't need to teach and regurgitate and look at how we build out that wholesome citizen. So that's the idea of the party. It doesn't take long to do. Consultation, of course, with our stakeholders, parents, religious bodies, civil society, members, education, educators, the education society, education fraternity, parents and children, because we believe in hearing children too.
You touched on how civic education can be used as this gateway to retraining our boys and girls in building healthier relationships. And you touched a little bit on domestic violence, for example. I wanted you to just give us a little bit more color on the importance of that, because in our society, we often hear that boys and girls, but mostly for boys, they are not allowed to express their emotions. They're told to suppress it. And on that basis, how would civic education be used to as a tool for emotional intelligence, regulation, and building that better citizen, that wholesome citizen you're talking about?
Yep. So, like I said, civic education, we might be calling it civic education, but we have been teaching some of this. And there are countries in the world who have civic education as a topic, and they still have some of the issues that you identify. So I don't think it's going to be the wave of a wand. I think as a country, we have to determine that we do not want X, Y, Z in our society, and we're all going to speak up and implement laws and deal with laws. But a lot of the issues are very complex issues. So the domestic violence issue that you raise is a very, very complex issue. The person you love the most and who your heart skips a beat for every time you see, and who you'd give anything for, is the person who hurts you by slapping you or kicking you. And it's very easy for you after the first initial hurt to get back with that person, because you have the complex dynamic of these emotions and love and so on. Things are changing though. So I'm 25 years this year as a lawyer. When I came back in 2000, I still remember this because I was just shocked. We learn from the book at law school what you have to do and what the rules are and what orders you can get under the Domestic Violence Act. And I was very proud that Guyana had a Domestic Violence Act. It was 4 years old at the time. In 1996, we had passed that. And I go to a court 6 in the Mirage building, and the magistrate I go all enthusiastic, I'm going to get this order because this is years of abuse and it's all detailed in this affidavit. And the magistrate looks at me and he says, "You want me to put him out because he slapped her?"
Wow.
I said, "I want you to put him out because the law says this is what she's entitled to if she's being abused and beaten in her house." He didn't make the order. And that was 25 years ago. Now, if I go with that same affidavit, a court will make that order, most likely, or it's going to be a public outcry. So we have moved, we have changed, but the complexity of the human romantic relationship has not changed a lot. So you still have that to deal with. And so you have countries like the United States of America where every 3 seconds somebody is abused domestically. It's not a Guyana problem.
Right.
It's a very, very complex issue. So to help along those issues, but we can educate people. And so I've actually seen a change. The police back then in 2000, 2005, 2006, 2010 even, the police would not, would laugh at some reports. That's very different now. Very different. You might still have the odd rogue cop laughing here and there, but it's not seen as cool. Everybody would scorn him or her if it gets out that he's laughing or she's laughing. Then Minister Rohi had put a whole policy in place that if someone comes in to make a report, it must be recorded. It must reach the court and let the court deal with whether you're going to dismiss or drop the charges or whatever. But that was not going to happen at the police station anymore, because the mischief we were trying to cure then was that complainants were dropping the matters at the police station, and then there was also the claim that the police wasn't taking it seriously. So to remove that burden from understanding or knowing for sure whether it was the police taking it seriously, he said every complaint has to reach the court. Let the court deal with whether somebody wants to drop the matter or not. So we've moved over the years. We've not moved to a place of complete eradication, because you're talking about human beings and delinquent human behavior. But we've definitely moved from a place where we used to be.
On the domestic violence issue as well, I've seen a few videos with yourself where you spoke about some of the cases that you've handled over the years, challenges with the court system. And one of the things that you've spoken about, which many citizens agree with, is the disparity in how bail is handed down in some of these assault cases. Sometimes you see their photos posted on Facebook, for example, where you see a woman is visibly harmed with cuts and bruises, and the person who inflicted that harm, they received a bail of about 100,000 or 35,000, 25,000, and he gets out. And women still say, you know what, even though he's been told to keep so much of a feet away from me, I still don't feel safe.
Right.
How can we begin to address that? And what are your thoughts on
So
how
bail
we feel
is
about
not
that?
punitive. You don't refuse bail as a punishment. Each citizen is entitled to his freedom and innocence and the presumption of innocence until guilt is proved by a competent court of law. So if there's a complaint made, someone is actually entitled to bail. And that was my recent complaint, that a particular offender was not granted bail. So you don't take away bail to solve an issue. We have to move to speedier trials and a more accountable system. So no magistrate should feel comfortable, because it's usually in the magistrate's courts that these matters are dealt with, should feel comfortable adjourning a matter repeatedly, because every time you do that, you make a woman unsafe. Deal with this matter, deal with it expeditiously, and make orders that you're allowed to make without hesitating. The learning on this issue, I mean, these things are so old now that it irritates me when I see people not being cognizant of them. Nobody runs to a court or a police after the first slap, you know. The learning is you're abused for about 35 times before you make a first official complaint. And if we get courts to start understanding that, then you don't adjourn matters as we go along. We have a new developing thing now with using media to hurt women by exposing nude pictures either given
Yes.
to you or acquired by you, even if it wasn't given to you when a relationship ends. And I've seen courts dragging their feet on how quickly that should be addressed. You shouldn't drag your feet on that. And so the society has to develop an intolerance for that, so that any system, magistrate, police, the justice system in any way kind of slows down on this, that the nation runs you out of town, and that there's no tolerance from any of us that allows for that kind of sloth, which in turn allows offenders to repeat, or people looking on to feel comfortable doing this. Why don't we walk around killing people? Because we don't want to be in jail. We don't want to be sentenced to death. We don't want to invoke the ire and scorn of our fellow citizens. And so the system has to be accountable and has to present itself in a way that deters people who might want to offend, or be a repeat offender, or people who are looking on and growing up. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be scorned. I don't want to have a court impose a sentence on me, so I will not do X or Y or Z. So the system has to be more accountable.
My last topic that I want to discuss with you, women in parliament. You are regarded as one of the most formidable female politicians in parliament, providing some really articulate arguments over the years. And we see a number of fresh faces on the campaign trail. What's your advice to those women who are eager to build their career in politics? What have you learned, and what are the top 3 things they should always keep in mind as they pursue this path?
I have a bit of a controversial view on that. So I believe firmly that women have to be at the table. I think it's really important. I think a different perspective is brought and forced. And that's why our law that says each list of candidates must be at least 1/3 women. And for the most part, although we haven't gone past the list having 1/3, most political parties have been extracting at least 1/3 into parliament. So, and I think it's very important to have a perspective from women at the table, just as it is to have a perspective from different ethnicities, different religions, different professions, so that you have a more holistic view on any given issue. I also believe, and it's been really cemented in this last parliament, that it can't be any woman. It's just like how you have stupid men, you have stupid women. And it's more harmful to the cause of women being at the table, which is still a struggle. You had entire political parties who nominated large numbers to the Constitutional Reform Commission and didn't think it was okay. They didn't see it fit to put a woman there. This political party, the PPPC, did. I think we were the only people who had women on the Constitutional Reform Commission. Small things like that. So it's still important that we talk about this and make it an issue. But then I've seen women who go in and whine. They do no research. They complain. They make themselves into victims. They just present a picture that allows someone who wants to keep us out to say, see, that's why we don't put women there. And it's so it's important not to have women at the table, but to have qualified, sensible, articulate, measured women at the table. And so that's what I learned in the last 5 years, that it can't just be women. So it's a little bit more of a defined, and not just that last 5 years. You kind of saw it before, but I saw it really defined in this last parliament, where I'd see woman after woman standing up and just wasting this opportunity to really, demonstrably show why it's a good idea to have women at the table. So what should women do? If young girls particularly, don't shy away from this. For every time you shy away from showing your talent, you deny all the rest of us, and particularly men, from seeing what women are capable of. And I had that conversation with a friend as well as work colleague this morning, where the it's bigger than you. It's showing up and showing what you can do, and thereby exposing people who may not have hitherto known what women can do. So it's far more than just an individual showing up. I think it's showing up for the bigger cause of showing what all the women around me can do if given a chance, but also showing them that it's okay to stand up, shine. We're still going to get hit a little bit harder on almost every issue. There's going to be someone who decides they didn't like how my hair looked. And I bet you they don't talk about any man who comes here and they didn't like their hair or their lipstick or something. So you still got those very shallow. That's not my problem. That's theirs. But it's important to have women representation. It's important to have girls step forward. And it's important to step forward with all that you have and not expect any quarters because of what your gender says you are. And just to show up. So that poem that says, shine as brightly as you can because you're not doing anybody any favors if you hide your light under a bushel. That it's important to give girls that platform.
Minister Manickchand, as we close, you have spent many years in your portfolio. What are you most proud of?
It would be access, raising the bar on access, raising the bar on quality, changing some perceptions about what we can and cannot do, breaking the mold, because education could be very robotic, could be very stuck in, well, this is how we've always done it. And I'm most proud of also giving new people platforms that are thinking outside the box and platforms that they ordinarily would not have had, and then looking at how that develops. For me, I came in knowing, because I was sent to Region 9 in 2020 January, spent 10 days there. At the time it was campaigning for election, the 2020 March election, and it changed my life. That's where I saw that if government fails, for places like a hinterland community, it's not just a lack of service, it's their entire life that collapses. And so it's really important for vulnerable communities, smaller communities, to make sure governments work and work equally and equitably. So I came in knowing that if I didn't change out how education was done in the hinterland, I'd be a failure. I'd consider myself a failure. And I'm really glad to say that 5 years in, 3.5 years in, we've moved trained teachers from 43% in the hinterland to 86% in the hinterland. Very deliberately, very consciously, very everywhere in the hinterland. The last village in every community, they have teachers training because of investments we've made. We have moved a number of teachers. So that's a qualitative change in terms of training. But we've also moved a number of teachers quantitatively. We've doubled the number of teachers we have in the hinterland. You're going to start seeing that. Because if we have teachers who are training, then it means children will start doing better. And once they start doing better, they're now eligible for the college. So in about 10 years' time, you won't have to take in trained teachers from the coast. You'll have the teachers coming from those villages. We now have, so take a Region 9, we've built 22 nursery schools, 8 primary schools, and we're building 9 secondary schools, changing the picture for what access to education looks like. So when you talk about, there's a village called Kokshibai. It's at the top of a mountain. I kid you not. So made me query, well, if someone chooses to live there, do we have to take service? And the answer is yes. But it's at the top of a mountain. To get there, you have to drive almost vertically. I kid you not. And on two sides, there's nothing. So if you fall off, they can't even find your body. And we've built a primary school there. We built a primary school, a nursery school on the border, this village called Bashaizon, where before that, they used to go to Brazil to get schooling. So we've changed what that looks like. You don't see it out here because you're out here. But to those children, to those villages, we've changed an entire culture and changed out what their opportunities can look like. We're able to offer people in the hinterland now degrees and masters and PhDs on the Guyana Online Academy of Learning, where you can go to study at 20 foreign universities in Europe and Asia and West Indies and North America at no cost to yourself in a variety of subjects. We've made the University of Guyana free. Everybody is getting assistance with buying school clothes and uniforms and books and book bags and shoes and so on the Because We Care cash grant. Every child from grades 3 to 6, and sometimes entire schools, if the schools are small, is getting breakfast and lunch from us, from the government. So there have been massive changes and big moves. But like I said, some of these things you take some time to see. So I'm very, very pleased about the last 5 years. Very pleased about how that went.
That's quite a legacy. And I know that the citizenry is looking forward to seeing how you're going to build on that 2025, 2030. So I wish you all the best in that.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
To our audience, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to follow us next week, same time, same place, as we bring you more insights from thought leaders within our political landscape. I'm Kiana Wilberg, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Starting Point. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for critical updates and exclusive content.